So without question, one of the most popular and common questions asked by new candle makers, and really even candle makers that have been doing it for a while, is what wax should I use? There are so many wax types out there. Now this is a topic you can find a lot of different information and resources on. In Facebook groups, researching, talking to suppliers and manufacturers, there's a plethora of information about all the different types of waxes out there. But because picking a wax is such a subjective decision, everyone's going to have a different way to approach it. They might use different factors to determine what wax is best for them, or just based off judgment. Everyone reacts to things a little bit differently, and because of that, everyone's going to have a little bit different opinion on the different types of waxes out there. So I thought I'd put together a video on my perspective and how I go about ranking waxes, so to speak. And we'll dive a little bit into a few of those waxes today. I'm going to focus this video on 5 of the most common wax types that new candle makers begin with, because I get that requested more than anything. In a lot of the candle groups and forums out there, you see this question asked a lot by a lot of new candle makers because they don't really know where to start. When they go to research candle wax, they see so many options. And so I really wanted to choose 5 of the most common waxes that they'll probably see when they're doing their research. Fortunately, for many of you, these are 5 of the most common waxes anyways out on the market. So hopefully you find this information valuable. Hi everyone, my name is Wade Thomas. I'm the owner of Black Tie Barn Candle Company. If you are new to this channel, I'd just like to say welcome. So this channel is dedicated just to kind of sharing my experiences, my knowledge, my information that I've learned over the years to really help out other candle makers. This channel really is dedicated to not just candle making, but also candle making business. So hopefully you find this channel valuable and helpful. And if you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification so you can get alerted whenever I post new videos. So I really appreciate you stopping by. Give this video a like and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do today is I'm going to show you kind of a presentation of the 5 waxes that we're going to review today. And we're just going to go over a real quick overview of each of those waxes, just so more than anything you can refamiliarize yourself with them, or an introduction to some of you brand new candle makers. After that, we're going to follow it up. I'm going to show you the tool that I created that kind of ranks different types of waxes by several different factors. And what's really neat about this tool that I put together is it has a default rating where everything's just kind of weighted equally. But I've also set it up so that you can customize it, because some factors are more important to other candle makers than others. For example, some care more than anything about how easy it is to use. Others care more about cost. Others care more about fragrance throw, things like that. So it allows you to adjust the weight of those different factors to meet your preferences. We're going to go into a sample review of these 5. You'll see me using that tool to rank the 5 waxes we're going to talk about today and kind of see where they come up. And I'll even do it a few different ways to show you how the factors or the rankings can change just by adjusting some of those weighted factors. Finally, in the description below, I will have a link to that tool that all of you are more than welcome to freely use. If you have any issues with that link taking you to the Google Sheet tool to use, please just let me know. But I am going to basically share out the template, and then all you have to do is modify it. The reason I want to share this tool is because it gives all of you individual candle makers a chance to kind of rank your waxes for yourself. As you start sampling more waxes and getting some more experience, then you can go back and edit this and use this tool to kind of re-rank the waxes more to your needs. So you can choose the waxes that you want to rank, and you can fill in how you feel each wax does in each category, and then you can change the weight of each category as well. So again, I really tried to create it and tailor it to specific candle makers so it's customizable for you all. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a July 2020 wax reviews, and you'll notice here we're only going to be doing container waxes. You don't really want to do reviews of different waxes for different purposes because they all behave differently intentionally. And so we're going to stick to just container waxes or jar waxes for this review. And again, we're going to start with just 5 today. The 5 we're going to do are GW464, IGI 4627, 4630, 6006, and a Joy Wax ProBlend600. Now the reason I have those listed together, if any of you are really familiar with those 2 waxes, you'll realize that they are essentially the same wax. They're both a 52-48 percentage of soy to paraffin. They behave almost identically. Really the difference is that they're just sold from 2 different suppliers. So we're going to group those 2 together. In future videos we will go beyond this list of 5 and just continue to add some more. A few assumptions that we have to keep in mind when we're going to be talking about these waxes. And so I want to go over those really quickly. The first is fragrance load. As you will see once we get to the tool that I created, the fragrance load is not, I do not have calculated into the rankings of the waxes. And the reason is because, as you can see here, fragrance load is not reflective of how well a wax can throw fragrance or perform in general. For example, many waxes have a 6% or 8% max fragrance load, but they throw the oil or they throw the fragrance so well that they're still better than waxes that can hold 10 or 12%. And so you don't really want to let fragrance load or the max amount of fragrance you can add to a wax to be any kind of deciding factor. It should be about the performance, not the capacity. Hopefully that makes sense. And we're also going to not include color. The reason we're not going to talk about color is there's too many preference variations. Many people don't use color at all. Some people use color and they really want a deep, vibrant, rich color. Others want more of a pastel-looking hue to them. So because color really doesn't affect so much the performance of the wax itself, I didn't really include it in the calculations that we'll see later, but you're more than welcome to. So once you see the tool that I'm talking about a little later, you can swap out any one of the factors for a factor of your own. So if you don't care about how well something ships in hot weather, you can take that out and put in color if you'd want. You can customize this, as I said earlier, to fit your needs. But for me, I left out color. Next is hot and cold throw. And I included this in assumptions just because we need to all remember that is a very subjective matter of opinion. It's also affected by the type and the quality of the fragrance oil. So it's not necessarily fair to think that a wax doesn't throw an oil very well if the fragrance oil itself is not of very good quality. It might not throw well in any wax. Just keep that in mind when you're doing fragrance testing, that you're using a oil that is typically a good thrower, and use that as your baseline. And then shrinkage and sinkholes. Now this will be on the calculation sheet, but again, like color, I do not have it included. And the reason is even though this is a major concern, it is hard to factor into a wax. And the reason is, well, first I should say that I do factor it into my overall ease of use category, and we'll talk about it later. But the truth about shrinkage, and this is a really tough subject because everyone thinks shrinkage and wax contracting is a bad thing. It's actually not. It can be good and bad. Shrinkage is good if it's an even, uniform shrinkage of the entire wax, of all of the wax together. For example, modeling paraffins require second pours, sometimes 3 pours. And many people don't like that, but they shrink so much that all the wax shrinks uniformly together that it creates a nice big dip that you didn't have to do another pour to fill it in. Now you're probably thinking, well, that sounds horrible. I don't want to have to do second and third pours. The benefit of a uniform shrinkage is all of the wax shrinks in so tightly together that you get no sinkholes. Now that crater where it needs another pour is not a sinkhole. That's just where the wax has shrunk and you need to fill it in. But it's not a sinkhole. In fact, you're not going to get sinkholes with that type of wax. It all shrunk together so tightly that you're going to get completely filled, full, dense, finished wax. On the contrary, a lot of waxes these days, particularly soy waxes, different parts of the wax will actually constrict or contract at different times in different amounts. For example, you might have the middle of your candle that is shrinking really bad, but you don't see it on the top or the bottom. Or maybe you only see it at the top. Or only at the bottom. And a lot of waxes do this. And what that happens is you get uneven and non-uniform contraction of the wax. That is what creates pockets and sinkholes in your candles. And you can't always see those from the surface. And that leads to a lot of problems with candles. Okay, sorry about that. I had to swap out mics real quick. My other one just randomly died on me in the middle of speaking. So hopefully you can pick right back up where we left off. What I was saying about shrinkage and sinkholes is just that so many people are afraid of shrinkage, and for good reason if it leads to sinkholes. But not all shrinkage is bad. Sometimes it's just telling you something about your wax, and as long as you understand what that means, then shrinkage really can be a good or a bad thing. So just keep that in mind going forward. I will probably do another video down the road on wax contraction and kind of go into those details a little bit more. And then the last assumption is just subjectivity, and that is just realizing that ratings and reviews are subjective by nature. Everything I'm talking about today is my opinion on my experiences that I've had with these waxes. Every candle maker has different reactions and different experiences with the waxes they use, and so everyone is going to have a different opinion. I mean, we're all human, which means we all have opinions. So don't take everything you hear as final word. Take everything with a grain of salt. Everyone has a different perspective on wax and the different factors when they're weighing their waxes against one another. So with that being said, let's do a quick overview of each wax. The first wax we're going to talk about today is Golden Brand's GW464, or mostly referred to as just 464. As you can see here, it is a soy wax. Most people are familiar with that. In fact, Golden Brand's 464 is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, starting waxes for new candle makers. And that's not to say that it's only a beginner wax. I don't mean it that way. In fact, a lot of candle makers continue to use this wax for a while. The reason, though, it's so popular with new candle makers is, one, because it's soy. And new candle makers, whether for good reason or not, choose soy waxes when they begin candle making. Possibly because they're wanting to get into candle making to offer some kind of clean alternative. Sometimes they've just read things about candle making and how regular paraffin candles can be hazardous on your health, which is highly debatable. And again, we'll have other conversations and videos on that topic down the road. But the last 5 to 10 years, soy candles have really taken off, and now coconut waxes are starting to get popular. It's really just kind of a circular thing, and things come in waves and things go. But soy is a highly sought after marketable niche right now. And candle makers can use that to market their candles as organic. And so that is a big reason that people flock to 464 early on. But the single biggest reason that people flock to 464 when they're first starting out is purely because it is marketed so well. It is marketed better than any other wax, period. Possibly because of its low cost point. So it's more affordable for a lot of new candle makers. It's also highly available. Almost every candle supplier offers 464. Now, it's not the only wax that is offered in high availability, but it is probably the most popular for that reason. It is highly marketable. One of the benefits of GW464 is that it comes in flake form. Pros of 464 is, as I just went into detail on, it is marketable towards customers wanting a soy or natural product. It also has a nice soft, creamy appearance. It's fairly consistent with even burns. It is inexpensive and affordable for new candle makers. It's got great cold throw, and again, it is highly available. The cons of 464 are very polarizing. In fact, the wax itself is very polarizing. Its benefits are great, and its negatives and drawbacks are also significant. And so it's really about what is the most important thing to you when you're candle making, and we'll go into this when I show you the wax rating worksheet that I use. But it's really about identifying the most important factors to you when it comes to choosing a wax. GW464 is not a wax that kind of falls in the middle somewhere, where if people can't really decide, they just go with it. It's not a well-rounded overall wax. It's got its strengths and it's got its weaknesses, and you just got to determine what's important to you. So the cons of 464 are that it's very picky on fragrances, and related to that is that it's got a weaker hot throw in general compared to other waxes. Now, as far as compared to other soy waxes, it's probably right around in the middle, maybe even a little bit better than some soys. But compared to all your parasoys, paraffins, your palm waxes, your modeling waxes, and things like that, it is going to be weaker in general than those. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to have good, acceptable hot throw still. It also doesn't mean that it's not going to be really good with some fragrances. Oils that work well with 464 will throw excellent. There's no question about that. In fact, you'll see a lot of people saying, I've never had issues with 464. And so candle makers that have had no issues with 464 in fragrance, though, is generally due to one of two reasons. Either one, through experimenting and testing, they have identified and selected oils that just happen to work well with 464. They're compatible with the wax. And two, to this point, they may have just been fairly lucky choosing their oils. It's very hit or miss. There are a lot of oils that just flat out do not work with this wax. No matter what you do, it's not going to throw it very well. Now, again, 464 isn't the only wax like that, but just know that it is a common issue with 464. However, also among the oils that it does throw well, generally in an apples-to-apples comparison to like a paraffin wax like 4627, it's just going to be weaker. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, though. Some people don't want to be knocked out by the scent from their candle. They want kind of a pleasant, balanced smell. Another negative is defrosting by 464. Probably one of the biggest complaints with this wax in general. The two are frosting and fragrance throw. Frosting is that kind of crystallized white crystallized look you see on the side of the jars on the top of the candle. It's more noticeable if you use color with 464, but you will see it on your uncolored candles as well. Now, there are little tips and things that you can do, little tricks you can do to kind of hide that frosted look, but at some point it's going to come back most of the time. Not much you can do about it. So you kind of, as most people that use 464 say, you're just going to have to embrace it if you want to use that wax. Sinkholes is a big one for 464. It falls into the category of candles that shrink non-uniformly, like I discussed previously. It will cool at different rates, different amounts throughout the wax itself. And so you can have sinkholes that kind of are hidden, and that will cause drowning wicks, air pockets, sometimes wicks that end up actually being overly large and large flames. It really, how a sinkhole affects your candles is almost impossible to detect, and that is one of the problems with sinkholes. It also has a very unattractive surface. And most of you probably know what I'm referring to here. That is that rough, kind of cottage cheesy, cratered looking top. Again, you can do things to fix that early on. Sometimes you can prevent it entirely early on, and other times you can fix it with a heat gun. But once it leaves your shelves and goes to a customer's, there's nothing you can do about it at that point. In fact, usually after the first burn, it's going to come right back. Customers of soy candles generally don't mind because they just understand that's what soy candles do. But a lot of people just can't get past that fact, and so just keep that in mind. And for some reason under con, this was not a con, it should have been on the pro side, was that it has less noticeable soot. It's generally a lighter color, almost kind of a gray or a whitish smoke, but that's also highly encouraging to people kind of going after that natural look. All right, so the next wax is almost like a polar opposite of 464, and that is IGI 4627. It is commonly referred to as its comfort blend. Now, this is a paraffin wax, and it is a very soft, almost Vaseline type texture, and it actually arrives in a bag that can be a little tricky to deal with, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. And it has kind of an in-the-middle average melt point for a container wax. The pros: incredible hot and cold throw. It is almost impossible to find a better scent throwing wax on the market, and that is its main attraction. It's also fairly easy to use after it's been melted, and that's the caveat, and we'll talk about that here in a sec. And then it's got great color and fragrance retention, deep, vibrant colors. It also has a negligible cure time. So once it's poured, and as soon as it sets up, it's ready to go. You don't have to wait, several days, weeks, or a couple weeks like you do with some of these soy waxes to really detect that max fragrance that it's outputting. It's also highly available. It is a very common, popular wax, and so it is sold in many places. And it's very consistently performing wax. The cons, this is what I referenced a few times, and that is a very messy packaging. Because of that Vaseline type texture, it is extremely soft, extremely greasy, and it can be very difficult to get out of the bag initially. Now, some people could maybe post in the comments in this video, as well as you can find it all over, different tips by candle makers who use 4627 on how to get that out of the package a little bit easier, how to store it for easier use going forward. But it is worth mentioning, it is one of the more difficult waxes to deal with out of the box. And it's also more expensive than your average wax. And then lastly, it can soften up a little bit during shipping. Not too bad. It's already a soft wax, and its melt point is not super low like that of 464. So, but it is something to keep in mind. Next and closely related is IGI 4630, or the Harmony Blend. The suppliers will market this wax as pretty much the brother or sister of 4627, in the sense that it is described as essentially the same wax, but they're able to put it in slab form rather than the messy bag. Anyone that's used both of them, there's a noticeable difference. It's not significant, but it's enough that you recognize it's there. For example, it does have great hot throw still, but I wouldn't say it's quite as good as the hot throw as the 4627, and it could just be because of whatever changes they had to make to put it into a slab form. Maybe because it's not quite as soft. It's a little more dense. That could be the reasons for that, but it's still great hot throw, but not quite as strong as 4627. Again, it is easier to use, and it's easier to use than 4627 purely because of the packaging. It still has great color and fragrance retention, negligible cure time, and availability, just like 4627 did. The cons are, even though it is easier to deal with than 4627 out of the box, the slabs can still be a little bit sticky. In fact, a lot of them will use some kind of saran or some kind of wrap or sleeve or film that they'll package it in the box, and that can tend to really stick into that wax a little bit, so it can still be a little tricky. It does have subtle shrinkage. Again, it's not a bad thing in this wax. You're not going to really see sinkholes, but you will notice in larger jars, you will notice a little bit of contraction by the wax. Wicking can be a little bit tricky with this wax, and you could argue that with 4627 too. It's kind of in that range where, due to the melt point being mid-range, it's also a dense wax. It's not tough to find a wick that works well with it or works fine, but you just got to keep an eye on sizing. It can be a little tricky, and you just don't want it to get too large or mushroom too much. And then finally, the last con was that it's easier to use, but not quite as strong as 4627. I don't know, that's a con, more of a note. The next wax is a very popular one called IGI 6006. You will see this one referenced and mentioned almost equally as many times as 464 these days, as well as the one following this. It is the first parasoy or paraffin soy blend that we're going to look at today. Now it's a 70% paraffin, 30% soy. It also comes in a slab form, but it's a very easy form to use. It's soft enough where it's easy to cut, but not so soft that it's just melting in your hands. The melt point is higher on this wax than any of the others we're discussing today, which is also important to note. Pros: great hot throw. It is 70% paraffin, and the way this wax melts and the way this wax throws is excellent overall. Availability: such popular wax, made by a very reputable wax company, manufacturer, and so it is highly available. Most of your suppliers will offer it. It holds up in summer heat better than most of the other waxes, simply because of that melt point 133. Container waxes do have a tendency during hot summer heat, when being shipped, to start softening up and melting a little bit in the jars. 6006 is not immune to that, but it holds up much better than the average wax. It's also considered one of the best overall waxes, and that is because it might not be the best at any one thing, but it's nowhere near the worst on anything either. It's really a really well overall balanced wax. Earlier I was talking about 464 being very polarizing. It's got great pros and it's got bad cons. Well, 6006 really is in the middle. It really is a very well-rounded wax. And then it also has excellent creamy, soft, smooth appearance and texture. The cons is that it can take a little bit getting used to. It is an interesting wax that really combines paraffin and soy, and so you're bringing on some of the benefits of each, but also some of the challenges. And so if you're coming to 6006 from something like 464, which a lot of people do, they'll find it really tricky at first. It's a different beast, and so you just got to take a little time to experiment and get used to working with it. And kind of to that point, wicking can be a little bit tricky with this wax. It's a highly viscous wax. It's a dense wax, and because of the combination of paraffin and soy, wicking can be a little interesting. But once you get it locked down, it's a great burning candle. It also has occasional shrinkage. Now, you will get sinkholes occasionally with this wax if you're not careful. You really want to control your temperatures when it's cooling. The size of the jar matters significantly. For example, your taller, thinner jars, or jars that are taller than they are wide, and then large jars in general, will have sinkhole problems more than others. And so it's really about experimenting and finding that sweet spot for temperature, your pour temperature, whether or not you preheat the jars, the ambient temperature of where they're cooling, things like that. But just keep that in mind. A lot of 6006 users will poke little relief holes with like a toothpick about 2/3 of the way through the settling process, and then kind of just hit it with a heat gun, and that'll smooth it out and take care of any of those shrinkage or sinkhole concerns. And then the last con is inconsistent jar adhesion. Again, once you've kind of got a good process in place, you can pretty much eliminate this problem. And I wouldn't focus too much on jar adhesion anyways. Wet spots, as they're known, are an aesthetic thing only. They don't affect the burn of the candle, the performance at all. But candle makers, it drives us nuts at first. But just the best thing you can do is learn to just get away from caring about that so much, because once again, your candles leave your shelves or leave your home or your location and go to a customer, you have no control over the temperature. What causes that wax to expand and shrink and expand and shrink and cause wet spots or jar adhesion issues is changes in temperature. You can't control that once it leaves your ownership. And so I wouldn't focus on it too much, but just know that 6006 does have a tendency, like one side of your jar will look perfect, and the other jar will show some of that adhesion issues where it's separated from the glass. Last but not least is basically two waxes we're going to review together. One is Nature Garden's Joy Wax, and the other is Flaming Candle's ProBlend600. The reason I'm combining the two is if anyone has ever used both, you realize that they're pretty much the same wax. The only difference is the company, the name that they slapped on it for the most part, and then anything that they might be doing in-house to manipulate it a little bit. I don't know that that's true. I can't verify that. But as far as the properties of the wax, they're extremely similar, if not the same. They're both a paraffin soy blend, this time slightly heavier on the soy at a 52%, 48%. And the reason that it is intentional, the reason is that it allows you to market it as a organic soy blend or soy candle, although 99% of people will still say a soy blend. It also comes in a slab packaging like 6006, but it's a little bit softer. And then the pros for this wax is that it is by far the easiest to use out of all the waxes we've talked about today, and I would say that compared to almost any waxes I've ever used, period. It's a huge benefit of this wax. It has great adhesion. It's mostly single pour. Wicking is easier with this wax than anything else, but you do have to understand that this wax, because of its low melt point and 50% paraffin, it does require much smaller wicks than average, and so a lot of people will have issues over wicking this wax at first. And it's got a great smooth, creamy appearance. Now the cons. Well, for starters, it's a little harder to find. You mostly have to rely from your single source suppliers. My advice is I would try whichever of these you want from the company you prefer and stick with it. And then just know that one of the risks in doing so is that it's not as available as your other waxes on the market. Or as easily available, I should say. It also has moderate hot throw. It's better overall than many will find with something like a pure soy like 464, but it's not near as good as your heavy parasoys like 6006 or your paraffins for sure, like we discussed earlier. And part of the reason for that, it is also fairly picky on your fragrance oils. Being half soy, many fragrance oils it works great with, some it doesn't. So it really comes down to testing and learning what oils work best for you in this wax. And the last one is it definitely does not hold up very well in summer heat. Which was a con of 464 as well, if I didn't mention that. They both have really low melt points, and in shipping in summer hot heat, sitting in trucks or sitting outside on a doorstep in the middle of summer, it doesn't hold up very well. It will start to melt, get droplets. Customers will open up candles, especially if they're upside down, that have started to kind of leak. And so if you're using this or 464 during the summer, I would highly suggest, if you live in hot areas or shipping to hot areas, I would suggest using some kind of gel packs when you ship. All right, so that is a summary overview of all the waxes we're talking about today. Now I'm going to get into the wax rating and selection worksheet. Okay, so here's that worksheet, and before we get into it, I'm going to have another video that goes into this worksheet tool and how I put it together and the way it works. Some of it is very self-explanatory, but it is highly customizable, and I'm not going to go into the details in this video, but I do encourage you to watch that video. As soon as I have it ready, I'll make sure it's linked into this description once it's complete, as well as I'll put a card at the top of this video so you can click on it and take you to that video. But just know that there will be another video going into the details about how this works, how I came up with the methods, how you can customize it for your preferences, how you can adjust the factors that are used, as well as the weight of each factor, meaning how much you care about certain factors when it comes to deciding a wax. But just to make sure this is understandable when we're doing the reviews today, it is done on a 5-point scale, which you'll see over here on the right side. 1 being poor, 2 being below average, 3 being average, 4 above average, and 5 superior. In other words, 1 is low, 5 is high. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. You get the point. So out of the gate, I have this all set up for default, and I do need to point that out to you because essentially what that means is every one of these factors is rated equally. There are 10 total factors. And each one is weighted the same. So it's going to be a total score, and a weighted score will be the same in this case because everything is equally weighted. Now I'm going to show you 3 other examples real quick when we're done putting in the rankings for each wax to show you how it can adjust the actual weighted score. And then one more thing to note real quick is there's 2 columns that have a blackout here at the top, and I already have them pre-filled in. That is shrinkage, which I just determine as low, moderate, or high, and fragrance load, the max fragrance load. I don't have those calculated into the percentages for the reasons we talked about earlier. Fragrance load doesn't indicate how well it throws or how well it performs, and shrinkage can be good or bad, so you don't want it to really skew the results. So I just noted for informational purposes only. All that being said, let's start with the rankings. With Golden Wax 464, I gave this on a scale of 1 to 5 for cost and availability a 5. For readiness and cure time, I gave it a 1. For jar adhesion, I gave it a 5. Surface and texture, I gave it a 1. Hot weather shipping, a 2. Overall ease of use, a 4. Fragrance compatibility, a 2. Hot throw, 2. Cold throw, 5. And wicking and overall burn, I gave it a 4. That gives it a total score of 31. And again, the weighted score in this case will equal the total score because every factor is weighted evenly. The next wax is the 4627. Cost and availability, it only gets a 2. But readiness and cure time, a 5. Jar adhesion, a 4. Surface and texture, a 3. Hot weather shipping, a 3. Overall ease of use, 3. Fragrance compatibility, 5. Hot throw, 5. Cold throw, 5. And then wick and burning is a 3. That gives it a total score of 38. 4630. I gave it a 3 for cost and availability. Readiness and cure time, it has a 5. Jar adhesion, a 3. It has surface texture, 3. Hot weather shipping, 3. Overall ease of use, 4. Fragrance compatibility, 5. Hot throw, 4. Cold throw, 3. And wick and burning, 3. For a total score of 36. 6006, the Parasoy blend, 70-30 paraffin to soy ratio. I gave it cost and availability of 4. Readiness and cure time, 4. Jar adhesion, 3. Surface and texture, 4. Hot weather shipping, 5. Overall ease of use, 3. Fragrance compatibility, 4. Hot throw, 4. Cold throw, 3. About average. Wick and burning overall would be 3. And the reason I'm putting these in so quickly is I've already determined these numbers. I'm just using another sheet to reference them to kind of speed up this process. But I really do take a lot of time to determine what score each one of these wax gets per category. And then the Joy Wax or ProBlend600 is the 50-50 roughly paraffin soy blend. Cost and availability, I gave it a 5. It is, oh, I'm sorry, that is not right. Cost and availability, it gets a 3. It's about average. Fairly affordable cost, but not the easiest one to find. Readiness and cure time, I gave it a 3. Jar adhesion, 5. Surface and texture, 4. Hot weather shipping, 3. Overall ease of use, definitely a 5. Fragrance compatibility, a 3. Hot throw, 3. Cold throw, 4. And finally, wicking and burning, because it burns so well and it's very easy wax to wick, it gets a 5. For a total score of 38. Now, there's little filters up each of these categories. We're going to categorize by weighted score, and we're going to do highest to lowest. So we put the highest score at the top, lowest score at the bottom. So if we don't change any of these factors and give everything the equal weight when considering each factor, then these are the final results. 4627 leading the charge, actually tied with ProBlend600 and Joy Wax at 38 points. Just under that is 6006 and 4630, and then coming up last would be 464. Again, this is just based off of the factors, everything treated equally, and my opinion on these factors. Now, I did mention earlier when we were reviewing the waxes that 464 is a very polarizing wax, and it's not going to do very well as an overall well-balanced wax, as you can see here. If every category is treated the same, to me it's not surprising to see 464 having the lowest score, because overall it is not a balanced wax. But you're going to see in another example here that depending on the factors that you care the most about, it can actually win and be the highest wax. So, out of the gate, everything all considered equal, I would 100% agree with this, and that is what I would have agreed with actually going into this. I find these top 3 to be my favorite overall waxes to use. But let's look at an example where we're going to look at ease of use. So if we care more than anything about the ease of use and how well it is to work with the wax, I've already got the numbers put in here. I've already sorted it highest to lowest. And in this case, you can see that overall ease of use was the most important, surface and texture, jar adhesion, wicking and burning, cost and availability. These values are sorted in a way that the factors are weighted more towards ease of use. And in this case, the Joy Wax ProBlend600 won, with 6006 coming in second, and then you can see going down. Now, the reason 464 is still towards the bottom, or at the bottom in this particular rating, is because of the issues with the surface and the frosting and the hot weather shipping and having to fix the texture and surface, little things like that, and dealing with sinkholes. And so, again, if the factors you care the most about are aesthetics and ease of use, then I would 100% agree with these rankings again. Now, the next one is, what if you care the most about performance and fragrance? Like, fragrance throw is the number 1 for you, and that is the case for many people. So this next one is going to have these automatically refactored where fragrance and performance are rated the highest. And in this case, it's already sorted, but just to be safe, we'll do it one more time. 4627 leads the charge with a 44.4, which is a great score. 4630 coming up next, 6006. I mean, you can just look at these and you can tell that they're kind of an order of fragrance throw capabilities. And so these results wouldn't surprise me whatsoever either. Now, that doesn't mean these are the easiest waxes to work with. Doesn't mean they're the most affordable. It doesn't mean that they're going to have the best overall look and appearance, but this is the order that I would put these in, just knowing my experience with these waxes before I even did a rating. Any kind of scale, this is the order I would have rated these on Hot Throw and fragrance performance. For all you 464 lovers out there, don't worry, I haven't left you out. There is use cases to have a preference for that wax over all others. And the biggest of those is being caring the most about the type of wax. If you are looking for something natural or soy or something you can market as organic, and you care the most about that, well, I've weighted on this next example, I have weighted those factors heavier to meet those preferences. And we're going to sort one more time just to be safe. And this time you can see Golden Wax 464 is leading. Not by much, but it is definitely leading the race. And followed up behind that is a ProBlend600 or Joy Wax, and then your 6006, your 4630, and 4627. Again, this completely makes sense to me. You've got your soy first, your 2 parasoys next, and then your paraffins. And so the point of showing you 4 different ways of looking at this worksheet is for 2 reasons. One, it really matters. It really depends on what matters the most to you. We could treat everything the same, or you can weight these factors to your preferences. And then the second point was just to show how customizable this worksheet is. And in another video, I will go into more detail of how to do all this, how I built this, how it works, and how to customize it for you. But hopefully these 4 examples gave you a good idea of these 5 waxes, how they stand up against each other. If you're looking for that kind of overall well-balanced wax, you're definitely going to have a lot of luck with your parasoys. If you're looking for fragrance, you're going to look for your paraffins. If you're looking for ease of use, you're going to look at your ProBlend600s and 6006s. And then, if you're looking for something natural, your 464s are going to work. So again, hopefully these 4 examples really gave you a good idea on how these waxes stack up against each other. If you have any questions, you can always reference this video in the future. And then once again, I will have a link to this worksheet in the description. Feel free to download it and use it as much as you want. And then again, I really highly encourage you to check out the other video. I'll get it posted as soon as I can that goes over how to really use this worksheet for yourself. So with all that being said, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please put it in the comment section below. I'll do my best. I try to answer every one of those. And then finally, just remember, this is all speculation. This is all opinion based. This is my experiences with these waxes. I use all of these waxes, every one of them. And I use them for different purposes and for different customers. I have wholesale lines. I have white label and private label customers. And so I do use all these waxes, and I use them for entirely different reasons. But the most important thing about choosing a wax is they all have their pros and cons. It's a matter of deciding what is most important to you. You guys have a great day. Thank you.